Next topic, my go-to COVID-19 commentators. And this relates in that these are commentators that I think give us a lot of the context that we need to determine what kinds of behaviors should be prohibited and what shouldn't be. I mentioned earlier on, and I mentioned last week, a guy named David Katz. I think his website is davidkatzmd.com. I find him to be a very valuable commentator. I would definitely think of him politically as a collectivist, and so not having a freedom and rights-based approach, although he does say some nice things about there is no such thing as the public, individuals matter. So I disagree with him on his political philosophy, but he is good in terms of, I think he's really honestly trying to grapple with the data. He acknowledges where things are certain versus uncertain, and he at least has the common sense and humanity to advocate what I would call selective isolation type policy. So to recognize there are very different risk profiles for different groups, and to say that there's something deeply wrong with just generally imprisoning everybody with something where the risks are disproportionately to some group of people who there must be some way to isolate them more versus everybody's life gets ruined. So I don't want to put words into his mouth, but I find him, what I like about him is I think he's really honestly grappling with it. He acknowledges degrees of certainty and uncertainty, and he really is concerned with human flourishing in a more collective way than I think of it. But nevertheless, he's focused on human flourishing, and I think fairness versus just saying, oh, the only thing that matters is the most vulnerable people and everyone else doesn't matter, which has guided a lot of our policy. A guy specifically I might have mentioned, I think I mentioned him last week as well, but you can check him out on Twitter, Amish Adalja. It's AMESHAA. That's his @. So AMESHAA. And his Twitter profile says, Infectious Disease MD, working on pandemic policy, emerging infections, preventing bioterror. So Amish, we have similar philosophical backgrounds, and we actually met through that. We've met at different kinds of organizations for people who are interested in Ayn Rand's philosophy, aka Objectivist philosophy. And I had Amish on the program several years ago, and he had some really valuable stuff to say about infectious diseases. And I particularly like him because I think he's very thoughtful and nuanced in terms of the accuracy of different claims. So he's someone that when I'm looking for, okay, what's the actual status of some news story I heard, I find him to be very objective, and he doesn't sort of have a predictable position of either inclination toward either catastrophizing the virus or underplaying the virus. So I really value his objectivity. Another guy, Jay Bhattacharya, you look up, so his last name, first name is Jay, and then last name is Bhattacharya. If you look up, he has a great video interview. If you look up Jay Bhattacharya, Hoover Institution, I think it is, and it's with Peter Robinson, Uncommon Knowledge. If you look up those, you'll definitely find him. It's got about 1 million views, maybe a little less as of this recording. And that is really remarkable in terms of just really being careful about what is and isn't known. And also, like I'm praising David Katz, being really thinking of everybody's well-being and flourishing, not just thinking of some specific group of people. And because Jay, I believe he has a PhD in economics, he's good at just thinking about the broader ramifications of different kinds of policies. And he's also a big champion of testing, as is David Katz. So that is just so valuable. And so still we're in such a backward position in terms of testing, because so much of what we need to make rational policy is to actually know how deadly is this, in what doses, to what people. Like if we know that, there's a lot that we can do policy-wise. If we don't know that, then it encourages the kind of panic and overreach that's happening. John Ioannidis, I think I've also talked about him. He's also, Jay Bhattacharya is at Stanford, as is John Ioannidis. Stanford seems to have a lot of good people on this issue, and his whole focus has been on the data we have is bad and really looking for better data and focusing on what is the actual risk of this to different population groups. And he's really been pointing out that it's not that there's no risk to younger population groups, at least let's say 30s. It's sort of remarkably low risk to young people, really young people, and much lower risk as far as I can tell than the flu is to really young people. But he's really good at looking for good data and at pointing out problems with the methodology that a lot of other people are using. And in general, he's known in the scientific community as pointing out bad methodology in all kinds of scientific research. So he's somebody I really admire and find useful. I'm one of these guys I mentioned, so Onkar Ghate and Gregory Salmieri. Onkar spelled, for those of you listening, not watching, Onkar space Ghate, and then Gregory Salmieri, or Greg Salmieri. Salmieri is Salmieri. And so these guys are both objectivist philosophers. So objectivism is Ayn Rand's philosophical perspective, and they're two of the best alive. I've worked with both of them on my energy work, and I've found them very thoughtful on this issue. So if you look up them and pandemic, or them and COVID probably, but just look up their names and pandemic, you'll see some really valuable discussions by them. Now, one final guy that I've just started following recently, and so he's interesting because he's a journalist. His name is Alex Berenson, and I don't know as much about his background or track record than I do about the others that I've mentioned. But so there's somewhat of, but what I really like about him is he is very, very focused on what is the actual evidence being very specific about how deadly this is, and then how deadly it is in different kinds of locations, what kinds of policies are necessary in different locations. And part of it is he's really questioned lockdowns, and he's given some of the arguments that I've given. He definitely didn't get them from me, and in part I got some of mine from him. But he's really been explaining, hey, these lockdowns don't make sense in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of evidence that they're not at all the best way to do things. I mean, logically we know that they're not, but that they're not even as effective as you might think. And he's also just very, very by default pro-freedom, but he hasn't been one of the people who said throughout, oh, this is no big deal. In fact, I just saw a tweet of his retweeted by somebody a month or maybe 5 weeks ago, and he was considerably more alarmed then than he is now. So that's not to say that his evaluation of the danger is more accurate now. That's hard for me to say, but he's somebody who's really interested in understanding the danger of it in a specific way, specific in terms of the precision of the dangers, but also location-specific types of things. And he's very aware of the irrationality and the costs of lockdowns. And so that's something I really appreciate, and I enjoy reading him. So hopefully some of those commentators will be valuable for you as well. And if you have any that you recommend that you think are consistently good in terms of their methodology, email me at alex@alexepstein.com.
Power Hour. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of energy. Power Hour. The antidote to shallow thinking about energy issues.